In the 1950s, an obscure, unassuming photographer lived alone in Brooklyn, operating his business from a storefront. Rudolf Abel attracted little attention until it was revealed he headed a Soviet spy ring operating in America. He was caught and sentenced to 30 years in prison.
Do you feel that you received a fair trial?
I would refer that question to my attorney, Mr. Donovan.
Our American system of trial by jury is the fairest system in the world.
In the world of espionage, Abel was known as an illegal, a spy who lives under an assumed name and is controlled by Department S of the KGB. It is Department S that selects the agents who quietly blend into the societies of other nations and lead seemingly normal lives, while secretly carrying out orders passed to them from Moscow. This is part of a television program about the black riots in America in 1968. It was produced by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. The end credits are interesting in that the sound man on the film crew, Rudy Herman, was a KGB illegal. He was Colonel Rudolf Herman, whose cover story bears many similarities to that of Colonel Abel. Both men entered the U.S. through Canada and both pursued careers in the film industry. Rudolf Herman went first to Toronto, where he lived quietly with his family in a small house on Sutherland Avenue. He was ordered to take a job with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. In 1969, Colonel Herman was ordered by Moscow to move from Toronto to New York and set up as a photographer while he organized his network of espionage in the United States. His appearance has been disguised and his voice electronically altered.
Oh, yes. For the past 25 years, I was getting every weekend on 2 days radio transmissions.
When Herman was finally caught by the FBI, Richard Kinsey was deputy chief of the Soviet desk at FBI headquarters in Washington.
He had been sent on meetings, had been sent to meet people in Canada for one thing, had he not?
Yes, he had.
Do you know anything about why he was sent up to Canada?
I'd prefer not to go into to that.
Colonel Herman traveled to Quebec City, where he went to Laval University and met with a Canadian economics professor named Hugh Hambleton.
Hello, are you Professor Hambleton?
Yes, I am, yeah.
Hugh Hambleton is a specialist in petroleum economics. He has been named by Colonel Herman as a long-time trusted source. Professor Hambleton met Herman many times and supplied him with information. This interview was filmed with hidden cameras.
How did you meet Rudy Herman?
I came with Laval, as I remember. I mean, I'm pretty honest, because
when did he come to Laval?
I don't know the guy, he faces the guy. I'm being honest. I don't remember exactly. I just know I knew him at Laval. I certainly didn't know anywhere else.
Well,
Herman met Hambleton at least a dozen times in Canada, and in 1975 they met in Haiti, where Hambleton passed Herman information about the Chinese embassy.
Well, he must have come there to see you.
There was a top-secret FBI RCMP operation targeting Professor Hambleton and Colonel Herman, codenamed Red Pepper.
What was the reason for the meetings between Herman and Hambleton?
Again, you're getting into what is still a sensitive area. I can say this, that Colonel Herman was ordered to contact Hambleton by his own admission, by his superiors in Moscow. But beyond that, I would not like to go.
Professor Hambleton is not as naive as he might appear. During World War II, he worked for Free French Intelligence. After the war, he worked for Canadian intelligence in Germany. But then, in the late 1940s, he met in Ottawa with Vladimir Borodin, a senior recruiter for Soviet intelligence.
But you met Borodino in '48, did you not?
From 1956 to 1961, Hambleton had top secret security clearance when he worked for NATO in Paris. Professor Hambleton has also made 2 trips to Cuba. He met with a leading Cuban intelligence officer, Ricardo Escartin, who has recently been expelled from the United States for espionage activities. In 1975, he made a trip to Moscow.
How come you went to the Soviet Union then? I didn't go. But you didn't go to the Soviet Union at all? What information?
Later, he confessed to making a 10 to 12-day trip to the Soviet Union in 1975, where, in his own words, he was under considerable pressure from the KGB. Subsequently, the RCMP raided Hambleton's Ottawa residence and seized a shortwave radio and code books. Professor Hambleton was just one of Colonel Herman's contacts. Herman has provided the FBI with significant leads on Soviet agents operating in North America. His espionage activities were of the utmost importance.
My job would be without any importance. I would definitely not spend such a long time in the United States. And besides, you know, during my years of service, I was several times promoted.
Now Colonel Herman is somewhere in hiding in the United States, an illegal who came to the surface. Carlo Tuomi is another example of an illegal sent to America by Moscow.
You were known as an illegal. What exactly is an illegal?
Illegal is a foreign agent who enters the country with forged documents and establishes himself as a citizen of that country. Little by little acquires all the documentation, the driver's license, birth certificates, credit cards, and so on. Finds a job, gets all the credentials and all the background, future references as a bona fide citizen of that country. For instance, in this case...
That's what happened to you, right?
That's right.
And you got all this from Moscow when you were trained as a spy at a spy school in Moscow?
That's right. That's right. That was a major part of my schooling.
In case of North America, Canada, and the United States, what is much more dangerous are these so-called illegals who are smuggled into these countries. That is, people who come here under a new identity, and they live as citizens of these countries, and they would start operating really in case of war between the Soviet Union and the United States, for example, or in the time of a very serious crisis when, for example, the diplomatic relations would be broken.
In case of war, I would be, among other illegals, the only means by which the Soviet Union could get any military intelligence from the United States, because all their diplomatic means, all their open means would be cut off.
And at the time you were with Czech intelligence, there were actually agents sent over here.
Yes, that's right.
Who were to just sit and wait.
That's right, yeah. Very many.
The Soviets used many routes to secretly place their illegals. The Soviet fishing fleets, which regularly stop at North American ports, have often provided the KGB with the secure means of landing their spies. Boris Stern was a photojournalist with the Soviet fishing fleet and recalls an incident he once witnessed.
One time, we left a man in St. John's, Newfoundland. He had been kept in hiding on my boat. I thought, the other people on our boat thought, he was an illegal being dropped into Canada.
You believe that this was a case of dropping a spy off in Canada?
Yes.
Within the KGB, there is another department which controls illegals. Department V conducts what are known within the KGB by the macabre description wet affairs, assassinations, sabotage, and other violent acts. It is the department that takes care of the dirty work of the KGB. Until he defected to the West, Arkady Shevchenko was the senior Soviet at the UN.
That has been the department which operates in the secrecy, which is even unbelievable for the Soviet secret society.
Have you ever known
of
any Department V people in North America?
Yes, it was in New York, in the Soviet mission in New York in the middle of the 60s, and one of my friends who happened also to be working with the KGB, he told me, look, you know, this man looks so quiet, calm, and even respectable as someone. If you look at him, you would never believe that what he is really doing, and to what branch or to what department of the KGB he himself belonged. The most sinister thing in the world, which he is doing.
This man was a member of Department V. He was trained in Moscow and sent to Canada, where explosives had already been hidden for his use.
Well, then fine, let's do an interview. I mean, okay, well...
He refused to be interviewed. After months of work, the Norfolk Investigative Unit traced him to a small town where he now lives in hiding.
I mean, you were in the KGB and you were sent over to North America to engage in espionage acts, and you decided for one reason or another not to go through with this. And, however...
Sobotka was sent to Edmonton in Western Canada, where he spent 4 years working and acquiring all the credentials of a normal Canadian citizen. In 1965, the call came from Moscow. He was ordered to go to a Toronto suburb and observe a house and its occupants. The house was at the time inhabited by one of the most famous defectors of all, Igor Guzenko, who fled the Soviet embassy in 1945. His defection led to the uncovering of Soviet spy rings in North America and was a severe setback for Soviet espionage. 20 years after it occurred, Department V of the KGB was still sending its agents looking for him.
If he comes so close, my life, of course, was very, very... And if I open door, incidentally, I never open door. Never open door in my house.
Possibly went to the wrong house?
I don't know, really don't know. So he could be my come in the wrong house or something, but I never myself opened door.
Sobotka had been activated by KGB agent Oleg Komenko, who at the time was working as a counselor at the Soviet embassy in Ottawa and was traveling with the Russian Moiseyev Ballet on a North American tour. Strategically placed in Western Canada, Sobotka was ordered to plan, in the event of war, the destruction of the key refining and pumping stations that supply much of North America with its energy. Edmonton is also a center of top-secret cold weather testing for Canadian and American forces, and Sobotka was ordered to find all he could about these facilities. He had other important missions, one of which was to act as a link between Moscow and a KGB sabotage network in North America.
I would presume it was no accident that you were sent out to Edmonton with oil refineries and all that sort of thing.
No, it wasn't.
It was not an accident you were sent there?
No, it wasn't.
And I would presume that
they had their plans on that I must really go.